Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review the original Predator film. So, going into this movie, it's just kind of fun looking back on this because I had never actually completely watched this movie ever before. It's kind of a really fun thing to go back into here now and just realize, yeah, I think I've mostly just watched the ending of this movie, where Arnold, of course, in all of his muddied up glory, is to go on and fight this predator. I could probably say that I've seen bits and pieces of this film, but I've never seen it in its entirety until now. Like I never really knew why these people had gone to where they were going to, and so on and so forth. There was a lot of stuff that just kind of I never saw because I never saw this movie in its complete form until now. Like it's kind of like Halloween, the original Halloween to me, where I was like, yeah, I never really like. I always saw always bits and pieces of Halloween, but I never saw it in its completion. Just because there's some movies where you're just like, oh, okay, like I get the gist of it, and then you just move on to other films because there's freaking so many Predator movies or Predator movies. I honestly could say that uh, I like this original variation of this film, and I can also like the Glover sequel movie. But I think probably overall, I probably just like the 2010 Predators movie much more so than anything else. I just like that concept. I like the action in there. Uh, I like where I think Adrian Brody, I think is his name, the main guy in the film. Like I like the way that he is to approach this film, and I just find it to be interesting. Where we have like Topher Grace's and Lawrence Fishburne's, and like all kinds of mixture of stuff in that movie. Plus, it just has an interesting concept. But with that said, uh, I haven't seen much of the Predator game, and I guess I'll eventually go in and watch some more of that. I think I saw like Lord Minion 777 play some of the Predator game, but I don't think I've actually gotten into the story of to see what they do with Dutch in that game, which obviously people will know that probably by now. Uh, but yeah, so going into this, what is this one about? What is this Predator movie about? So it seems that Dutch and his men are to go off to get some intel from two people, a guy named General Phillips and a guy named Dylan, telling them to go off into the jungle to rescue some hostages from this guerrilla like force. So, when these characters are to be dropped off into this forest, I'm gonna have to do a leave off or something like that when we get into actual spoilers about this. But and I'll get into more specifics about it. And so these people are to be put into this forest where they realize that there had been a whole team that had come prior to their team, and they had been wiped out. And so now they're like going on to just be like, well, like, I guess we're just expendable, right? Like, Dylan, we're just expendable till, like, this mission ends up getting done. Like, whoever you have to send to just wipe these guys out, because evidently, uh, these guys are facing a serious foe here. So, we get to where Dutch and his men are to all wipe out this guerrilla force, but it seems like there is one enemy left uh, to be taken out. So, with that said, that of course will be the Predator. So, One thing that I could say about this film is I don't think that this movie does showcase the Predator all that well. Like we barely get to see any kind of real gadgetry from this character. It's not like later films where we actually get to see the Predator killing people in the films. Like we have several weapons that the predators have at his arsenal, and most of the time he ends just using the plasma caster, which is to be the weapon that blasts people and murders people in this film. And that's all that's really used. There are some points where he uses his wrist blade at some point, and we of course have the wrist gauntlet later on in the film, which kind of ends the film. Uh, and of course, we have his bio mask that eventually he takes off. So yeah, going in this film, uh, the funny thing of this is that this Predator movie could have honestly put together a prequel movie. They kind of leave it with the whole Jim Hopper situation where they could have had a whole prequel movie, and they never did that. They could have had the whole thing leading up back to showing us the Dutch mission, and they didn't. They never did that. You would have thought that they would have tried to come up with some kind of way to do a prequel movie to just kind of give us back that whole scenario, but I guess they didn't think of that, right? Or they didn't go back to having Arnold in this film or having Glover in any number of these films to have us be like, ooh, wow, like they're bringing back the old characters from any number of the movies. No, they just kept pushing out another one of these movies, another one of these, and like they didn't get better. they just get, they just got like the same old same, and like I think that was the real problem with Predator is it just really like you can enjoy the action movie of it, but also you're just like, but man, like this is nowhere near what it used to be. Like after that whole Alien versus Predator fiasco, uh, that just kind of hurt both the Alien and Predator franchise. Like for me, that's what I feel. Um, it just really because like Freddy versus Jason helped both of those characters and just kind of made it more interesting to continue to go on to a franchise that has well over been put out. But like for this, it hurt the franchise, and they tried to continue to do other things. They tried to do like Alien versus Predator Requiem and all this kind of other stuff, and like it just weakened the whole movies over time. Where eventually, I think more and more people probably lost interest than because the stories weren't getting more creative. They were just kind of getting more of the same. So, uh, here's one story. So, in the very first Predator movie, Jean Claude Van Damme was actually supposed to be the Predator, and in an interview, he had mentioned that supposedly he was going to be the Predator person, but it seems that they weirdly wanted him to be in this costume that was to have these like stilt like things, or they wanted to try to make him way like the creature way taller than he actually was. And so Van Damme refused to go and do that just because uh he thought he was going to get hurt. Like he thought there's like, you know what, that doesn't seem all that safe. Like I'm not going to do something like that. And then we found out later whoever they replaced Jean Claude with ended up getting hurt, and then he's like, well, like I guess I was right to reject this role. So for a lot of people who are asking, because it always comes up about the whole Jean Claude thing. Um, yeah, like he cleared that up in an interview that he mentioned that like, well, yeah, I was going to do this role and it looked really cool and blah blah blah, but it just turned up that like the way that they wanted to put out the Predator was a really unsafe mechanic. So no. Uh, Also, really kind of funny to uh, have it be that I guess at some point Arnold Schwarzenegger was possibly going to become, if anybody remembers the Bill Bixby Incredible Hulk show, Arnold was actually the first one up to actually play the Hulk in that show. But then I guess Arnold was to have turned it down for I guess to have Lou Ferrigno be in the Incredible Hulk. Could you have like I couldn't see Arnold going and doing a show. Like I think we would have to have Arnold just like going on and just doing movie after movie after movie. I can't see Arnold doing a show ever. But it would be kind of cool if we did have like a Predator mini series because I think like this is just gonna go like every single other thing where instead of doing a movie now they're gonna have to forcibly do a show and kind of bring back life into this thing by putting a show together because look what it did for Chucky, look what it did for uh any other like I Know What You Did Last Summer is currently coming out even though that show's not that good. Look at look at any number of things that has probably now fused into a show. Scream technically went in to do an MTV show. Now they're being finally being back to going and doing Scream films. So, like, I'm expecting Predator is going to head in that same direction, but we'll see. And here's one thing that I do have to say before we get into spoilers about this. Predator in this movie spends way too much time being an invisible entity that we don't see or is way off in the distance firing away murdering somebody. And I wonder if that is because they like had a hard time figuring out the concept of this character or figuring out what it was going to look like. So hence why there was to have been such a delaying thing where people are just firing into the randomness of jungle because they didn't know what this thing was going to look like. And so it probably took forever production wise to have this thing look like something. Uh, but yeah, but when looking back on it, like you actually want to see the Predator killing people, and hence why in the later films, like you don't see the Predator character as invisible as in this first attempt, this first go around, because they were just kind of figuring out what they needed to do with this character. So, with that said, let's just go into that double five because it's about roughly that time yet again to go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time again to spoil this movie. So, like I would say, we have Dutch and his men, of course, a certain number of characters, Jesse Ventura's, Carl Weathers, Bill Duck, uh, and so on, because really that's all that really matters. So, yeah, like sadly enough, people get lost in the shuffle because, not that they're not good characters. We also have Sonny Landham, which plays Billy in this movie, and they kind of really build up Billy as this like badass kind of or badass kind of character, and so yeah, so going in here, let's so Dutch goes on and just kind of he chucks he chucks uh his little bag of stuff. He chucks it out of the helicopter just to get out of the helicopter, pick it back up, and then go trotting out. I'm like, Well, that was such a pointless thing he did there. Was he just chucked out his bag just so that way when he gets out of the helicopter he has to repick it back up and sling it over his shoulder or whatever. So Dutch makes it into the mission briefing with General Phillips and Dillon, and so Dutch meets up with Dillon, who I guess had been a CIA operative, and he had been like a pencil pusher, and so Dutch is to reminisce about that of like, oh hey, like CIA making you move through many pencils, ha, like because they're smacking together with their arms and then they're having this like arm wrestling match like in the air weirdly, and so Dillon like finally submits, and so they're like, oh okay, so so Captain Phillips is to tell us that Dutch is going to take command up until a certain point, and then Dillon is to kind of take command after him. And Dutch is to mention that he works alone, and Dillon's like, well, not this mission. Because Dillon had sent a whole company of Green Berets before Dutch's team, and they all got wiped out. We'll find that Billy is to find all these people skinned and like hung up to dry, so to speak, when they make it to this jungle. So, making Dutch and his team realize that this team was just an expendable thing that that was to just be put there for Dillon to just like, well, who's gonna make it through this mission? How many times are we gonna have to go in here and send some team in to wipe out this guerrilla force? Why is this so difficult? And again, there could have been a prequel here, but they didn't do that. Even if it would have been something as like, yeah, all these people were guaranteed to be killed off, I still would have been fine with that. I still would have just been like, hey, like, but it would have been a fun movie, right? It would have been a fun adventure, and like it would have been cool to see what they would have brought to a sequel movie where we would have had to second guess the whole time. It's like, well, does the Predator win? Is somebody gonna get out of here unscathed? To kind of teed up to have this woman be taken by this guerrilla force. Like, let me know in the comments below if you would have liked to have had a sequel film telling us that Jim Hopper story. So, and I know I'm rushing through this, but whatever. Like, it's Predator. Like, people have probably seen this hundreds of times, and so. But I can also enjoy this and the sequel movie. But then I would probably just easily jump to the 2010 film and just let that die right there. Because I don't think I would want to go to any of the other Predator things, Alien versus Predator. No, I think I just want to go to a point in time where like there's only good Predator movies. So and even like the sequel movie, I'm just like, I could take it or leave it. So like I could easily have jumped to the 2010 movie and been fine with that and just called it a wrap after this one. Just because even the second one, I'm just like, I don't really care for like a detective versus predator movie, but like there's something fun about that film. But anyways, so we reach to the jungle, and so they find the dead bodies, skinned alive. And so we consistently have, I think, Hawkins, who is to consistently tell these dirty jokes about him and him and his girlfriend, and how his girlfriend is to have all these like like Hawkins is to consistently have these PUSSY jokes, kind of having it to where it seems like he's to mention that she has a big PUSSY. I spell things out so that way I don't have to get cuss words and stuff like that, and like it diminishes the video. Heaven forbid, right? So or it makes this video less seen by people. Whatever garbage crap that we have in our lives. Supposedly, PewDiePie had made a video mentioning that supposedly the dislike button is going away soon. So I doubt that that's going to happen. I think they're going to realize, oh, that was a mistake, or yeah, that's not really going to happen unless somebody emails me and tells me that they're definitely guaranteed to get rid of the dislike button. But even that, they're probably just going to keep it on there, but supposedly not have it do something? Which that means nothing then. You should take it completely off. Stupid. Like, oh yeah, like, that's like telling me, like, hey, yeah, when you light a lighter, there's a flame that comes out, but like it may or may not hurt you. Like, yes, it still would hurt you because it's a freaking flame. And so like the dislike button is the same thing where it's just like, well, like the dislike button is going to hurt you or hurt your video, and it's still there. It still exists, and it also just kind of gives people the paranoia of things, just like, well, of like whether they're like good or bad at what they do. Like it's still present there, and even if it doesn't supposedly affect your video, it still affects you mentally or psychologically or whatever. Um, so, but let's get on to this. So Dutch is to, with his men, um, go off through this jungle, and Dylan is to kind of trip at some points, and is to supposedly give away their position, and Mac is to be so upset with Dylan doing that Mac is like, hey, if you give up our position one more time, I'm going to bleed you out and leave you here. And so Dylan's like, okay, all right. So once the once Dutch's people see the skinned bodies, they make their way to the guerrilla force, and of course they go on to shoot and wipe them out. And they find out that there is to be one hostage left, that is to be a woman named Anna, who at first does not really speak English to them. And so there are certain people there that are to try to translate what she say at some points. So they take Anna with them because she's the only hostage left, because no one else, I guess, made it out. So now we go on to start to have people really still being uneasy. We have guys like Billy, who is to be the man that fears no man, but Billy, for some reason, is to be uneasy because he had been uneasy the whole entire time that they had been there, and Dutch tells him that. And so Billy is to mention that there's something in the trees, that he feels like he senses there's something there. And so here's the goofy thing that I don't think they realize, because when we have them all put up a camp, Billy was to say there was something in the trees, but they decide to go and just put a bunch of tripwires and all kinds of stuff, all kinds of traps via their camp. And so then when a body is to go missing, let's just say, because we'll get to that, their immediate thought is like, oh, he's using the trees. And I'm like, Billy just said that before. There's something in the trees. And then Dutch is like, oh, he's using the trees. Really? Wouldn't you think that he's been using the trees? That's just me thinking here. If Billy's saying there's something in the trees, there's probably, like, you should probably be watching the trees consistently to take this thing out. But that's, again, just me. And so they, at some point, go and put traps in the trees to just be like, well, he's not getting in here now. He's not going through us, through these trees. That's my Arnold accent impersonation, whichever. Anyway, so pushing on. So, now that they wiped out the Guerrilla Force, Anna is to decide to go and run off. And, like, the group of Dutch is to just tell Dylan, it's like, well, hey, she's your baggage. Like, you're gonna, like, hold on to her. But Anna runs off, and so we have Hawkins who runs off after her. And so he gets to her, he grabs her, and so the Predator ends up going after Hawkins first. I think, like, there's so much about these deaths where you can't 100% tell what exactly is going on here, because when you fight an invisible force, or when you fight a thing that you, like, is often kind of, like, it's not close-up attacks here, it's a lot of stuff from distance, or it's a lot of stuff that kind of feels off-camera, so you're not 100%ingly saying, like, oh, I definitely know how every person dies in this film. So, but Hawkins, I think, ends up getting cut, and then Hawkins ends up getting dragged off, and we are to naturally assume that he is to be killed off screen, and they are to never find his body, sadly enough. So, when all the guys are to regroup up and see Anna laying there, like, blood upon her face, and Dutch is to say, it's like, well, she could have gotten away, but she didn't. Like, she could have easily, like, ran off or taken anything from Hawkins, like his gun or whatever, when he was to be killed by this enemy, but she didn't. So, at some point, Dutch is to see that that Anna is not going to run away from them, that she needs to survive, and that survival is to really just be with them. So Anna is telling Pancho what had happened, and so she ends up saying that the jungle came alive and took him, which, that is actually a really cool way to have that be understood, of a cool kind of thing where it's like the jungle took him. Hence why I would love to have, like, a movie where, like, you would just literally have, like, the jungle consuming people. Like, all of a sudden they would just walk off, and all of a sudden a tree would just, like, yeah, just eating somebody. Man, wouldn't that be just the wildest movie to just have, like, a hole in, like, we have, like, quicksand that's killing people where there shouldn't be quicksand, or something like that. Just having, like, a part of the world that is to have just wanted to fight back for whatever reason. But that's a whole goofy idea in its own right. So, but I'm sure a lot of people are just like, yeah, but I want aliens. I want Predator. So the jungle came alive and took Hawkins, and so they never find his body, weirdly. So next up is to have them start to go up against this Predator, because it seems like they can start seeing like certain kind of blurry things into the forest. And so it gets to the point where eventually they're just blasting through the entire forest just to blast through the entire forest, not hitting not hitting much of this predator character, but he supposedly does bleed out somewhere. That's the lime green juice that Anna is to go and put onto her clothes to have like some, I guess, kind of blood sample of this alien creature. So we maybe clip this character, but also when looking at it, when the predator is to be shot, like we have the whole sequel movie where he goes into somebody's bathroom and goes and heals that wound, and he's like, "Argh!" And he's like yelling because like of course that is like a painful way for him to like heal his wounds. We have like the couple or whatever like hearing like some predator in their bathroom, and they're like, what the is that? And he's like, "Oh," and he's like taking these like pieces and trying to heal his wounds with this like blue weird stuff. So these guys are blasting away into the forest, and so the predator is to also use his blaster, his of course weapon of choice, which is the plasma caster, because we barely see his waist or his wrist blades used very skimmingly in this movie. There's this one part where he uses his wristband to or wrist blades um, to kind of keep Arnold's head where it is, but like they don't actually do much with that. From what I've seen, like I think there might have been one point where Dylan might have been hoisted up by these blades, but again, I'm not 100% sure about that because we just kind of see that part like way off in the distance. So, but we'll get to that. So now that they're blazing and firing all over the forest, uh, the Predator is to use its plasma caster to go and shoot uh, Blaine's character, who is Jesse Ventura's character, twice, and Blaine goes down because he's blasted through the chest to where he leaves this huge gaping hole. And so when they go off to see his body, they're like, oh my god, there's no powder burns, there's no nothing. Like, what bullet did this? And they're like, I don't know, it must be something new. So they take Blaine's body and put him into a poncho and are to go and, of course, get camp. And so Mac is to, of course, say that Blaine was his best friend, and Dutch is kind of to mourn the loss of Blaine because like they were like everybody was all good friends here. So they go off into camp. Mac is to put this flask or whatever on top of Blaine's neck, and I'm just like, wouldn't it have been like? Wouldn't Jesse have gotten like a little ticked off at that moment to be like, seriously, you're gonna put like this flask on top of my neck? Like, what the buddy? Like, you said you were my friend, but you're gonna put this flask on my neck, and then kind of and then put this poncho over my head. Um, but it's whatever, right? Because he's gonna be gone after this. So they put all these tripwires and they put all these traps, and so they're kind of waiting it out. And so we find that a trap is to go off and Mac is to go after it to find out that it's just some boar. And so we have Poncho is like couldn't have found anything bigger, and Mac is like, shut up. So we have them go back to camp to find Blaine's body now missing. And so they're like, why would he have taken the time to take Blaine's body? That makes no sense. But then also, that's when Dutch makes the consensus. He's in the trees. He's in them. He's doing a Tarzan. Oh, which, funny enough, we have Dutch doing that later on in the film when he's to call out the predator. Just be like, combat, let's go. You killed all my friends. I'm gonna get you. So now Dylan and everybody are just kind of waiting for when the chopper is to supposedly come back. And so they're kind of prepping for that. To where it's like, hey man, just like wait till we can get the chopper to come back. And like, we're going to get the heck out of here. Because like, whatever this thing is, like, yeah, it's like, we really need to get the freaking heck out of here. Which, I'm a little confused of how Predator goes from wild jungle out in the middle of nowhere. Well, technically, considering you can't really, like, how is it that this thing, like, makes it to the places that it does? Like, why do we have this Predator have to pick this certain place out in the middle of the jungle nowhere to, like, cement where it's supposed to be? Plus, also, we just have these, like, Predators just arrive, and yeah, so it's just, like, you would think that there would be some rhyme or reason, which is never really said. Like, as if, like, they, like, have this, like, thought process of knowing that there is going to be some champion that is to arrive in this location, and they have some kind of weird sixth sense or weird kind of sense about it, that they will find their like their kind of thing there. Like, maybe they sense where there's always a war going on, hence when you would go into the 2010 version where they collect all of these murderers and killers and whatever that specialize in death to go off and have them fight the predators. You would also think that at some point, with all the collection of all the people that has ever won against these predators, you would just have them all come back. Wouldn't that be a cool, like, Expendables movie? To have every single champion of every single Predator movie all come back as a team to fight the predators. That would be pretty sweet. I would like that film where everyone is to come back. Glover comes back, even though you know that some of these guys aren't exactly all that. You know, it's been some decades, but you would think it would be a cool thing to bring all these guys back as, like, okay, like Predator versus Glover and Arnold and Brody from the other one, from the 2010 one, and so on and so forth. Whoever lived through the other ones, bring them all back. But moving on. So we also have them set up all of these traps to set up these traps for one of their guys that are with them to accidentally fall into one of these traps. We have Pancho, who takes a tree trunk to the chest, and he falls over injured. And while they had set up all of these traps, and they were to put up all these traps in these trees, so now Pancho is injured. And so now we have these guys desperately wanting to find this predator and settle some scores. And so that leaves Mac wanting to go out in the forest to try to go after this thing. And Dylan is to follow after him because he's like, hey man, like, you're not the only one with scores to settle, because of the whole Hopper situation and how Dylan feels horrible that he sent those people out to die. So both Mac and Dylan are to go out there to try and seek out this predator, to only have them be killed in the process. Mac ends up getting blasted in the head, and Dylan is to be suckered in by things that sounded like Mac, where it's like, turn around, over here, and so on and so forth. Because here's the thing, like, the whole predator mimicking thing, I don't think, like, happened all that often. Like, I don't think the whole suckering in kind of thing, like, we have where, like, Danny Trejo was to get killed off in one of the other Predator movies. Spoiler for the 2010 one. And, like, they use him as, like, a baited thing. And they basically say, hey, man, don't fall for it. And so, like, they rarely ever, like, have actual traps set up. Because if anything, like, the heroes set up traps for this Predator. I don't know. Anyways, pushing on. So, Dylan is to, of course, go and blast this, try to blast this Predator, kind of shoot wildly, because this thing is still seemingly invisible for a bulk of this film. And so the Predator is to blast off Dylan's arm. I think it's his right arm. So now Dylan's arm is flopping onto the ground, still firing bullets, and Dylan is like, yeah, because he lost his arm. And so Dylan is still trying to shoot this Predator thing wherever it still is, because he can barely tell where it is. And so the Predator, of course, is to go and take Dylan, lift him up, and kill him that way, which is to have either choked him or to either, at some point, probably sliced off his head afterwards, because he probably is to hoist him up by the knife blades and chop his head off in some way or another. So now we have pretty much everybody just like, God, we are so effed. Let's just get to the chopper, because get to the chopper, because we're gonna have to like, we're just gonna have to leave this place. There's no way to wipe this thing out. They could have probably just gone and like, hey man, freaking like send a nuke here to just wipe this jungle out, because like this thing is just unstoppable, and just make sure that it's dead. So now we have Dutch, Poncho, Anna all running off to make it to the chopper. And so Billy is to stand his ground and is to stab his or cut his chest and have it like bleed. And so Billy is going to make his stand here. And Dutch is like, Billy, come with us. And Dutch or Billy's just like, no, like he's just gonna make his stand. He's just gonna take this thing down. But basically, Billy is to really just give them more time to have them make it to this chopper, because Billy is to pretty much realize that everyone is going to die here. That's the way everything is to be broken down. So Billy is to supposedly try and fight off this Predator, but all we really just see is Billy screaming into the background. Sadly enough, Billy's dead, supposedly. Maybe he made it out. Maybe him screaming is just to scare the Predator, and the Predator's like, and maybe the Predator's like, that guy, and so maybe Billy made it out of there alive. We don't know. Billy could have been screaming for anything. Maybe the Predator is like, dude, we're not going to kill that Billy guy, because, like, it doesn't seem like there's a guaranteed death here, because it's off camera, basically. We just hear his screaming, and that's all we hear. Whatever, right? So Dutch and everybody is to naturally assume that Billy is dead, even though secretly I'm thinking that he's not. So that way he can be in the Squeakquels, or whatever. So, so now, like, Dutch is to haul off Poncho, and so what happens with Poncho is Poncho ends up getting blasted in the freaking head, I believe, and he falls over dead. And so now, I believe Dutch also gets like blasted in the arm, and so Dutch is to now have to take his weapon of choice and try to like blast away. And so when Dutch falls over because he got blasted in the arm, of course we have Dutch telling Anna, "Get to the chopper," and so she's scrambling to go off to get to the chopper, and get to the chopper, get it. So I think Anna goes into the chopper, but they, I think, end up coming back for um, Dutch, assuming that he's still alive. So Dutch goes on and is now having to desperately try and run away from the Predator because he is honestly run out of ammo. And so now he is to go on and like run off to fall into this water and then try and get out of this water, and he is to be in this mud, and he is going and trying to drag himself away from um, this location that has so much mud in it. Dutch goes on and is to like be head to toe covered with mud, and so Dutch goes on and is to like try to like camouflage himself into the brush, and so the Predator is to come from out of the same watery location for us to finally be able to really legitimately see this character for once, as he's kind of electrically uncamouflaged or uncloaked for this short time here. So, in a way that kind of Anna explains it, that this character is to be like chameleonized or is to like be some kind of big lizard. Kind of feels like Ghostbusters 2. Like every once in a while you meet a nice one, Starman or ET, but eventually they come out to be some kind of big lizard. So, uh, so Dutch is watching on as the Predator is to find this heat visioned thing, which is just some rat, and then the Predator walks off because he can't figure out where Dutch is, and he's like, "Oh my God, he didn't see me," and so Dutch is to realize, heck yeah, I'm gonna put on this camouflage, and he's not gonna see me, and now I'm gonna go up against him and fasten some kind of weird bow and arrow like thing. Which it's kind of funny because when you have Arnold shoot out this bow and arrow thing, it looks so weak. It doesn't really look like he's cocking back this thing, and the arrow goes really quickly to go anywhere. It just feels like that this shot of this bow and arrow is so freaking weak. It's like ridiculous. But when you really look at it, like look how freaking huge those arrows are. Like they look so goofy. Like of course they wouldn't go like of course they wouldn't be this like quick like thing, but they showcase at one point him firing off an arrow, and it goes like really like I think through a tree. But anywhere any other time, like it just does not look that good. It just looks like he's like just kind of like pushing the arrow out of the bow, and it just doesn't look all that great. So hence why I guess you never see Arnold ever doing a bow and arrow movie ever again. From what I've seen from an Arnold movie, that he always has a gun or a weapon or a laser blaster thing of some kind of sorts. So, like, that's the thing that I never understood about the Terminators. You would think They could have had it to where there's some part of their body that just shoots out a freaking gun, like it just shoots out their butt. Just, oh, I have it. I have laser gun now. Anyways, so kind of like Will Smith and like Wild Wild West, he's like, why don't you just have a like a key thing that just shoots out your butt? And Kevin Kline's like, well, that's the first place that that Loveless would have looked. So, so anyway, I don't know why I'm referencing Wild Wild West. That's a horrible film. There might be some like there might be some fun, goofy adventure thing about it, but still, it's just Will Smith like decided to not do Matrix and instead did Wild Wild West. So man, was that a great idea? So hey, do you want to like not do the movie that makes a lot of money, or do you want to do Wild Wild West? Because that's all you have left to do now. Because you didn't do Matrix, pushing on. So Dutch is to, of course, go get his arsenal together, make some goofy arrows that he's to go and use against the Predator. So now that it seems that Arnold has put so many traps together, we go on and we have Arnold who is to go and light a torch-like thing to now do his Tarzan thing to call the Predator over here. And so the Predator is to come on down, and so Arnold's kind of Tarzaning it up and kind of going from tree to tree to tree, like via these ropes. And is to just kind of like hold himself up against these trees. So when he sees the Predator coming on down, he then goes and jumps to another tree so that way he can go and use his arrows to try and take down this Predator. But it seems that everything that is to happen kind of is all for naught because the Predator starts wildly blasting into the forest, and consistently Dutch is to get like fireworks display all around the tree that he's at, to where he's just having to kind of like dodge these kind of these blasts that are just kind of randomly coming that look like fireworks instead of actual laser blasts. So it's just kind of weird looking. So Dutch goes to be now like forced to go again into another sploosh of water, and so that washes off all of the mud that he spent so much time decorating his body with. So that's when, of course, the Predator can spot him. And so the Predator, now realizing that his like kind of infrared is now useless, and so the Predator starts decking and starts slapping away like Dutch and starts beating him up, and uses like kind of wrist blade to kind of like push uh like Dutch's head into this tree to kind of keep him there. But what good does it do? Nothing. So since the Predator is to realize that his infrared is a waste, he ends up taking off his biomask and ends up showing what he really looks like. And of course, that's when we get Arnold. It's like, you are one ugly mother. So now, of course, we end up having this fight out between the two. And so Arnold is to punch this thing in the face just to have one of its teeth, or something that looks like a teeth. I don't know what exactly you would define that as. I didn't go into the, hey, let's break down the what are the Predators, like the pincers, the stingers, the whatever? It seems like teeth, right? You would think. So Arnold goes on and is now trying to fight this thing, and but he scampers off to make it to his booby trap location, where he's to kind of slide down that way to get to this trap that, of course, he is to have put there to be laying in wait for this predator to make it near to him, so that way he can go and drop this one stick. So we have, of course, the big moment where Arnold is like, kill me now, like I'm here, kill me. And so the predator is to see that there seems to be some trap laying in wait. He's like looking up and he's like, no. So the predator starts walking around and Arnold's like, oh, like, but Arnold is to have another trap laying in wait, which is to be another tree trunk that is to fall on the predator. So now we have the predator, who is, of course, to have this like seemingly tree trunk on top of him. And so Arnold is to go and check whether or not that this predator is still alive or not. And so it's covered with lime green blood. And so Arnold's like, well, what the hell are you? And so the predator's like, well, what the hell are you? So now we get it, of course, with the predator is realizing that it's going to die soon. So he goes and takes his wrist gauntlet and is to now do a self-destruct weapon. So, I guess I probably forgot where people could probably see this movie at. I completely forgot about that. I waited till the very ditch end of this movie to go and tell you where to see it. Evidently, it's free on Amazon right now. It's easily free on Amazon, I guess. So if you have an Amazon subscription, you could probably easily be able to see this there. There's probably a number of apps that I would probably recommend people seeing, but if it's free on Amazon, and if you have an Amazon Prime, like, you would think anybody would have an Amazon Prime subscription by now, but if they don't, uh, this movie has also been out for a while also, so, but, you can go on probably a number of different apps. You can probably just search the word movie app, and you can probably find a number of apps that probably has this movie. Because you would think this would be a no-brainer movie for a lot of movie apps to have. If you Google searched, you could probably go into Letter C Movies and see this movie for absolutely free. You could probably go on to a litany of other movie apps that I've used over time. Like Google search Fox HD Movies, and you'll probably see an app that Darren Fact is to say like play 1080p HD movies or whatever, and you can go and download that app and probably see this movie possibly for free. You can go on to possibly other apps that I've used over time called TV Crush, and Google Play that, and Google Play search that, and you'll find movies for free. You could also search movie apps and find something randomly that you can find a number of movies. That's a suggestion that I randomly use. So, because now that this is over, it's the perfect time to just promote something, right? Even though I don't get money for any of the things that I am technically promoting right now. So, the Predator is to use its self-destruct device upon his wrist gauntlet. And so now we have Arnold running off into the forest, like running as far away as he could from this predator. And so with this big, massive explosion, I guess there was an easy way for them to say where they could find Dutch at. So they go into the forest and they see Dutch, who is still alive, and he's just kind of like, bah, like, I'm so exhausted from fighting this thing. So they pick him up into this helicopter and just take him off and have him drive away. You would have thought it would have been really interesting to have Dutch kind of having like a debriefing and like have a whole scene where he's to like be talking about the aftermath of this scenario, or it would have been really interesting to have seen like what happened to this character afterwards. But I guess that's really what the game is to provide later on. So for a lot of people who are fans of this variation of Predator, you can go ahead and see from whoever has it, the whole Arnold Schwarzenegger Predator story continues supposedly, or whatever is that they did in the game. I'm not quite sure because I didn't go into it. Maybe I will after the fact just be like, oh yeah, I guess they did complete that story in the video game. But with that said, I'm going to get out of here. Bye, buddy. Bye, buddy.